I think talk therapy is incredibly helpful. And I think it's also got limitations. So what I saw with myself, what I see with other people is talk therapy plays a role, but if there's a trapped emotion inside that hasn't been expressed, you can talk around it. It doesn't change the situation. So if someone's trying to process the emotion, if they're not really toxic, they're trying to process it honestly. If they are toxic, they're trying to avoid processing it and manipulate people. But if we're able to remove that emotion, then all of a sudden the feeling of the need of talk therapy seems to dissipate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it can be helpful to consolidate. It can be helpful to put words to things, to strategize, to move forward. But we don't need to try to explain the pain anymore because the pain is gone. That's quite interesting observation.
Yeah. I definitely. I obviously I learned that through the way of pain, and it definitely made me realize that talk therapy is a helpful medium in order to create like new pathways of thinking and new behaviors and new skills. Even at the same time, like you said, if there's like reservoirs of stored emotions coming from some form of trauma or stress or abuse, the energy that's contained in these emotions from this trauma or this stress or this abuse is far more powerful than any piece of information that the conscious brain might have at any specific point in time. In fact, I remember specifically that this young lady at the time, I remember she would very regularly say on a daily basis, like, well, that was a mistake that I did that. That was a mistake that I did that. And she did something that was terribly hurtful, and she said something that was very bitter and toxic. But she would always kind of afterwards, spanning from an hour to a few days, depending on when we could actually get to that. But she would always recognize that she was not able to more or less to control it, right? The emotions were too strong. And at the time I was thinking to myself, so how many times are you going to make this mistake already? Like it's just over and over again. And now I understand that it's because the emotions were too powerful for her to do the right thing, meaning to do the connecting thing in the relationship, to do the healthy behavior. Didn't matter how many times she learned what the healthy behavior was. These emotions were too powerful. And when someone is going into a trauma response, especially when it comes to parental abuse, where like the primary caregiver, especially the mother or even the father, like this is how the child has developed their identification as a person. So this is like life or death for them. So I definitely learned that talk therapy is certainly good, except the emotions that are stored coming from negative situations can easily overpower any skills or progress or information that the conscious brain is holding. So that was a very big I didn't know that before this relationship. So I learned it in this relationship.
Yep.
And that's why I was hoping to have these discussions with you, because I think it would benefit a lot of people to know that alongside talk therapy, people should certainly get involved in some type of energy healing of emotions, like releasing negative energy in the body, releasing emotions, releasing energy from trauma that could be stored from a number of decades ago. Like this is very powerful stuff. So
for sure.
And I certainly learned that the hard way. I didn't know that. And I'm very grateful for the lessons. And at the same time, it'd be very helpful for more people to also, to know this. Yeah.
For sure. If people can avoid going through it, then if they can get a shortcut, then it can be quite beneficial.
Yeah.
And I mean, it reminds me of something that Jung was saying or writing, which is that if you don't know why someone does something, look at the result and assume that maybe that was the goal. So I see that time and time again, people saying, why would someone who loves me talk to me this way, or treat me this way? And, it doesn't make sense. So let's assume that the result, being upset, being hurt, being heartbroken, being afraid, let's assume that's the goal and then work it backwards, work it in reverse. Why would someone want that to be the case? And sometimes it's trying to release the emotions. It's trying to use someone else as a punching ball. It's resenting someone else who doesn't have the pain and suffering that they have. It's wanting to drag people down into the pain and suffering. It could also be identifying, and that's a big one, identifying with the pain and suffering. That's one of the risks we have actually when it's something we can observe. The risks with communities based around trauma or pain is it becomes part of the identity. So ideally, we heal, we move on, and that's just a chapter of our life that we're grateful for. But it can be complicated to leave a group if we don't have anywhere else clear to go to.
Yeah.
And if it's become part of identity, well, this person was a huge part of her identity to say, I'm a victim of XYZ. The issue was that it didn't really add up when confronted with the facts. And it was strange. It was keeping her trapped in a specific dynamic about pain and suffering. And she simultaneously painted herself as a victim, so had no responsibility. And, as a child, I perfectly agree. So, but with one incident, she was a teenager, which is, more on the cusp. Still, like the chap deserved whatever she thought and said. The chap deserves prison. There's no question about it, even if she believed it was the right thing. But then seeing how people rewrite the narrative, it was really eye-opening, because you have one narrative and then you've got facts that don't add up at all, and perceptions that don't really add up, which, I mean, to me was really humbling to see that, to think, I thought I had a clear understanding and my understanding just was totally wrong. So that was a really good lesson about whatever image I have, I should just ask questions and never assume that I can read between the lines, because I got this one so wrong. It was so much more complex than I thought, so much more, for her on the moment, less traumatic than I imagined, just in terms of actual things that happened. When she, not to go into any graphic details, but when she said that she was constrained to do something, I imagined physical force making her do something, when what she said was she'd been talked into it, but on the moment she really enjoyed it, which doesn't mean there was not constraint. Doesn't mean there was nothing reprehensible. Like I said, I think the guy absolutely deserves prison. But it's not the same experience if someone is holding you down physically and somebody talks you into doing something. But both of them are wrong. One of them is worse than the other. Just, notion of scale. I'm not like, one is totally wrong, the other one is really wrong also. But the scale is not the same. It's not comparable.
Yeah. And that's also something that I learned through experience also, is that someone that has had significant childhood trauma, and they, obviously due to the pain and just the experience emotionally and how they perceived it, they either get very good at hiding it. And this is obviously, you got narcissistic personality disorder, which is a false self in order to protect a very shameful and guilty and traumatized, childhood identity that's grown up into an adult. Or they become good at this victim narrative, painting themselves as a victim, and they actually get a small validation from this to, in order to validate the pain rather than to contact it fully and to heal it.